What you're about to see is a video of information that has come from many, many, many different directions within my own being. And many people have asked me exactly who it is or where did this information come from, because it's a varied set of parameters, and yet it comes together into one big picture. So just for the record, and just for everyone to know who and where this came from, and to give these people credit, I would like to talk about who my teachers were and where all of this came from. And in order to do this, I'm going to have to go all the way back to when I was a little tiny kid. And when I was really little, I was Catholic. And I went through all the Catholic schools, all the way up almost to the very end. And through high school, I didn't quite make it through high school, but I got almost through high school. And of course, Jesus was the first person that has ever influenced my life and through what is being transmitted to you through here. But as time went on, in my early 20s, I began to see that there was more. Not that what Jesus had to say was incomplete, only that I had a longing for a larger picture of what was being said. And I made a big switch. I actually became Jewish. And I began to study the Kabbalah and to see what that had to say relative to what Jesus had to say. And this went on for a few years until something that began to happen in my life in the early 70s. First of all, probably the most important thing that happened was I literally died on April 10th of 1972. And in a single breath, part of who I was, you could say, left here. And in another breath, when I breathed back in, the person who's talking to you now began to breathe through this body. And that, of course, had a big influence on my life. At the same time that happened, there were these two angels that appeared in my life. They have no names. One of them was, they were both about 10 feet tall. One was purple in color, kind of an ultraviolet color, and the other was green. And over the next few months, as they would appear into the room and begin to talk to me, they led me to many, many, many different teachers around the world. Some of them I physically connected with, some of them I psychically connected with, and in various ways I communicated with many people, which was probably about 70, though that's a guess. And interesting enough, they would actually give me the name, address, and telephone number of who I was to connect with, of who my next teacher was. It's kind of a funny feeling. I remember in the beginning, they'd say, okay, you're going to see this person, here they are, and call them up. So I'd just call them up, and sure enough, it would be that person. It used to kind of blow my mind in the beginning, and then I got used to it. One of the very first people, and it's someone no one's ever heard of, I'm sure, and his name was Wilf Chipman, and he was an alchemist. And they led me to him, and I studied with him for over 2 years, and I studied alchemy. And he was an extraordinary teacher. He really knew what he was doing on a lot of levels, and it was a very important groundwork, especially coming out of the Kabbalah. And at the same time that I was working with Wilf Chipman, there was another person that some of you may remember, which was Kirpal Singh. And I began to work through him and work with him during that time. This was back in probably about 1972. At that same time, I was brought to or introduced into the order of Melquisedek. It's actually Alpha and Omega, order of Melquisedek. And it was the first order of the Great White Brotherhood. There are 72 orders in the Great White Brotherhood, and my introduction was through the first order, the oldest one, and also the youngest order. The youngest order is the Brotherhood of the Seven Rays. And so it's through the two ends of the Alpha and Omega that it would really be more appropriate to say that they work through me than I work through them. The Brotherhood of the Seven Rays is actually in Bolivia, very near the border of Peru. The entryway is through the Valley of the Blue Moon. After that time, I became involved very deeply in Sufism. And Sufism, which came out of the Muslim tradition in the Quran, maybe about 700 years ago, was one of the first religions that began to see that really all religions are one. They're all interconnected. Of course, if you ask a Buddhist or if you ask a Catholic or someone else if there's an interconnection, they'll say no. But if you study deeply and go into the geometries of the inner aspects of every religion, of all the 8 major religions, they are deeply interconnected. And the Sufis saw this a long time ago. And so it became my path for about 11 years. And the first teacher that came to me was Hazrat Inayat Khan, and who brought Sufism to the West a long time ago. And then later through his son, Pir Vilayat Khan. One of the most important teachers that I had through all of this was a man named Murshid Hassan. And Murshid Hassan was the head of 7 dervish orders. He actually lives in a concentration camp in Israel. And though he's one of the most respected people in Israel, at least in terms of Sufism. And I spent not a long time with this man. It was only a few weeks. But he changed so many of my viewpoints of how I interpreted the reality. He was about 90 years old. He was a skinny little man. He was very healthy. At that time, I was into macrobiotics, and I was extremely strict about what I ate and what all that kind of thing. And suddenly this teacher comes in who affected me on a very deep level just by being in his presence. And as I watched him work, he just began to destroy everything that I thought was true on a lot of levels. I thought that the food was so important, and it is in certain ways. But I watched a man here who for 2 weeks I never saw him eat a single bite of food. Nothing. He may have snuck something in his room or something, I don't know, but I didn't see him eat anything. But what I did see him do was he took a cup about this big, put about half filled with pure white sugar, pour this thick coffee into it, and smoke these long cigarettes, these brown cigarettes. And all he did was drink this sugar coffee water and these cigarettes. It's the only thing he ever ate. And yet his light that came off of him was incredible. He loved children. He saw children as the true teachers of the world. And if someone would bring a child into the room, he'd be sitting on a stage with 100, 200 people around him, and if someone brought a child into the room, he would just stop. He would get down off of his chair where he was teaching and have the child put on the chair, because he said, this is truly our real teachers. There were other Sufi teachers that influenced me. One was Murshid Isa, who has the Circle of Friends from around the world. And Murshid Sam Lewis, who was a very important teacher of mine. I love them all. I also became involved in Hinduism in lots of ways, and I don't know if I could even begin to bring up all the different aspects of that. I was very closely connected to Yogananda, and I still love this man, who was also interconnected with the Order of Melquisedek. And probably not very many people from the Self-Realization Foundation know that, but he was. And also Sri Yukteswar, which was Yogananda's teacher, and who has recently given me a great deal of information. Also Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. Now, I know a lot of people, he's triggered a lot of people on that one for his presence in the United States. He was primarily a Taoist teacher, and he used himself as an example. So here's a man who comes to the United States and has something like 200 Mercedes-Benz or whatever it is, or Rolls-Royces, and everybody's saying, well, he's just totally into materialism. But what he was doing was showing through his own being exactly what we were doing, and using himself. If you understand Taoism, you'll understand what he was doing as a teaching. I was real close with Ram Dass from the very, very beginning, and I really loved this man also. He taught me how that I can just use myself openly, and anything that happens in my life, I can use that openly without fear. And in other words, instead of trying to protect your image of who you think you are, just let God do it and open up and just be who you are, and don't worry about what anyone thinks or anything else. And it was very, very powerful what Ram Dass gave to me. I also spent a long time, well, not a long time, but a couple of years at Lama Foundation, where Ram Dass taught a lot. And there were many teachers that came through there that influenced me in what happened here. In fact, the very act of living at Lama Foundation was a great deal a part of this teaching. In more recent times, Sai Baba has been very involved in what we're doing. He is involved with something that's called the triphase, which we don't actually get into here yet. It's a higher level of this work. And his work is important to what we are doing. I even became, while I was at Lama, I even became Muslim for about a year. I did Salat 5 times a day, and I passed through all the various aspects and studied the Quran to see how they saw the world and where they were coming from. And it's very beautiful, their point of view. I really love what they have to offer to the world. The Tibetans played a very important part in understanding the role. The Tibetans probably know more about the Merkaba than anyone else in the world, though Sai Baba is getting very close to it right now. And the biggest teacher that I had through Tibet was Kalu Rinpoche, who died not too long ago, but is now back in human form. He's just a child right now. And he was my greatest Tibetan teacher. I will always say that. I love him. Though I had to study with other ones. I had to go to Boulder and study with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I didn't really like that very much. It was a lifetime of chaos for him that he was teaching, and it wasn't real comfortable to be in his teachings, but they were important teachings, and I needed to learn what that was about. There was a little bit of Tarthang Tolku also that was involved in Tibet, but mostly Kalu Rinpoche had the strongest effect on me. I have studied Taoism for a long time, and my main teacher in there was Master Chu Feng Chu, who taught me the Taoist breathing and the breath, and how the qi and the power that comes through the breath. His understanding to me was really, really important. And the I Ching itself, though it appears to just be a book, is much more than that once it's understood. It's an exact replica of the DNA. And that I spent a long time studying. I feel through almost all of this various religious teachings that Taoism is probably the closest thing that I feel is the closest to my heart. There have been many psychic and channels that have entered into this work. People, one, for example, was Bashar out of Los Angeles. That's the actual person that comes through the channel. Work was very interesting to me in what he has to say. Though I have to admit that probably the biggest influence, or one of the biggest influences, put it that way, that have affected me has been the Native Americans. I have 12 Native American teachers. A couple of those I have not even met yet. They're still coming in the future. But I know that number is how many there are. The first one and the most powerful one that has ever come to me was Grandfather David from the Hopi tribe, who held the Hopi prophecy for a long time. And what he had to teach me and give to me was essential in all of this. From there also was in the Taos tribe in Taos, New Mexico, was Tell Us Good Morning, who was the head of the Peyote tribe out of Taos, and his son Jimmy Reyna. And those two especially Jimmy Reyna, have played a really crucial role. I studied with Jimmy Reyna almost for 14 years, and the way that he would teach and what he would show me and how everything was through the Native American eyes is essential in what is being presented here. Though Tell Us Good Morning and Jimmy Reyna were very important teachers in the sense that they worked directly with him on a day-to-day basis, two of the most important, even on other levels, more important people from the Taos Pueblo were Juan Concha and Cradle Flower. They were brother and sister. And Juan Concha was the chief of the Taos tribe until the Bureau of Indian Affairs came in and didn't allow that anymore. And they made a governor and a board of directors kind of. And when they did, they took Juan Concha and made him the cacique, or the religious leader. And Juan Concha came to my house for over 35 years before he died, every single year, usually at Christmas time. And I never knew why these guys were coming there. Every year there'd be him and 4 or 5 Indians that sit down and eat dinner with us, and I was going, who are these guys anyway? And after a while you just sort of assume they're there. But he was just making sure that he knew where I was all the time, because we had an agreement going all the way back until the year 1890. And where there were things that I had to do for them, which you'll understand as this video unfolds. Cradle Flower, his sister, she was a medicine woman, and she taught me so much on so many levels. Every time that I needed to communicate with her, or put it this way, every time she wanted to communicate with me, she would send a crow. And the crow would come to my window, and it would just keep pecking on my window until I'd get on the phone and call her or go down there. It wouldn't leave until I'd go there. And then when I get there and show up at her house, she'd say, well, did you see the crow? And I go, yeah. And then she'd tell me. And it's an interesting world. The area of sacred geometry is an area of where great influence has come in also, but you must understand that I didn't even know what sacred geometry was for many years in the beginning. These were just images that was coming to me from the angels, and I was just copying them down, and I would get great understanding from them, but I didn't know that there were other people that had studied this before. I thought this was something just I knew. But eventually, many years down the line, I began to realize that other people had studied this thing, and I started working and studying with other people. And there were certain people like Robert Lawler and Keith Kirchlow in their work, which was very instrumental, and Buckminster Fuller, of course. Stan Tenen in the language work that he has done, and Darrell Langham's work was very, very powerful in understanding the relationship of geometries to life. And people like Dan Winter, and there's many other people that have, Bob Gulick, I don't know if I can remember them all, but there are many people that have come in here and have shown me things about sacred geometry that have even added to. Though most of this work you're going to see came before I knew any of this. And probably the person who has influenced the geometry more than anyone else, and more information is coming from this one person than just about anyone else, especially around the area of sacred geometry, was someone who is still alive, though he was born 52,000 years ago. I know that's going to be pretty hard to sink in there, but his name is Thoth, T-H-O-T-H. And I guess in the area of science, there's been one person who has dramatically affected many of the ways of my interpretation of the reality through science. And this was a man named Bob Dratch, who lives in Colorado. And his work is incredible because he has understood and now understands the relationship of what's called waveform and reality. It's the unfoldment of 0 point, which is how a womb works, how creation actually comes into being, is at this moment being understood by the world, though not too many people talk about it. And so his work has been very powerful. So I'm sure there's probably other people that I'm leaving out, and to them I'm sorry if I haven't at this moment come up with your names, but this is a list of most of the people and areas that have influenced what you're about to see. So, thank you. Because there is one crucial aspect of this, and that is that about 13,000 years ago, something happened on Earth that actually started about 16,000 years ago, but the actual physical event was just under 13,000 years ago. We did something. We changed the way we breathe, which I'm going to talk about in detail. And the direct effect of that change in breathing pattern is something called good and evil consciousness, where we perceive ourselves as being inside of a body, looking out at what appears to be totally separate from you, which is completely an illusion. There's no truth in that at all, but it appears that way to us. And our right brain, which is the aspect of us that is feminine and that controls the left side of our body, and it is pretty much in tune, actually. It is aware that there is only one God. That kind of everything is okay, though it can't tell you, can't really explain to you why. But the left side of our body is where the problem is. The left side of our brain, which controls the right side of our body, the male aspect of us. This is where the real problem lies from everybody that we can, pretty much everyone agrees on this in our levels. Our left brain, the logical side of us, looks outside of the universe and sees everything polarized, separated. And there's black and white, and there's up and down, and male and female, and there's the inside and the outside, and there's the good and the bad, and all these things. And so your left brain does not see the unity of life, and does not really believe that there's only one God. It may even say the words, I believe there's one God, but inside there's this little part that's got this doubt. Because there's the good guy, there's God, and there's devil, there's all these separated aspects of us. And so this, these first 3.5-4 days, the main purpose is to clearly show your logical side that there is an absolute unity to the reality, and that you are an intimate part of that unity, and that there is only one God. It's essential in the sense that once your left brain sees that and understands it, then it begins to interlock between and integrate between the left and right brain, and the pineal gland is then capable of functioning again, because at the moment your pineal gland is, well, it does have a little bit of functioning through linear light that passes through the eyes and goes to the hypothalamus and into the pineal gland, and so you have a certain amount of functioning of the pineal gland, but its true purpose is to receive light, to receive prana, which is another form of light that's primarily higher dimensional light, and it can't do that at the moment. Once this integration between the left and the right brain takes place, then your pineal gland is capable of doing something, of receiving this pranic light, and then the meditation is possible. So if someone were to just do this meditation in this particular state without having the understanding of these first 4 days, it's highly unlikely that they would get very much out of it, even if they were doing it perfectly, because they've got a block, a shield that's blocking that from working. So that's why we have to go through so much of this stuff, and I don't like to do it, and most people don't even like to watch it, because it's hard, and and it's mathematics and all this stuff. But that's who we're talking to, is your male side. This is male knowledge, and it's also super condensed, which makes it harder. Okay. The other thing about this is that if you just come here and listen to what I have to say and then go home and practice the meditation kind of thing, you'll kind of be missing the point in a way, because what we're really talking about here, what you might say is group consciousness. Consciousness beyond your individual self. And because as you go up in consciousness, you'll keep coming to these places where you'll realize that you merge with, you might say, zillions of other souls. It just keeps going on these higher and higher levels of awareness. And you have to lose your identity. It's very much like if you look at your body is always this little microcosm that reflects the macrocosm and all there is. And you have all these, you've got about 100 trillion cells in your body, and they're all like people. They're different sizes, and they have different functions, and they're in different regions, and different, you might say, like different dimensional levels and places and things. And they all work together as a whole. But there is this kind of over-person, you, that's beyond all of that. And coming up through the levels is like a single cell. You're like a single cell down here, about to go up through the various levels, and as you do, you'll merge with tissues and then organs and higher levels of the body until you become this, what we're referring to as God is like me relative to the cell, but of course there's more beyond what we call God. Our levels of our concepts of God are limited, but nevertheless, we have to reach as far as our limits will take us, whatever our possibilities are. And that's what's about to happen to us. We're about to go up from a cell to a person, make a huge leap in awareness. And it's going to be a big one. And it's going to happen quick, real soon. This group consciousness thing needs to be reflected here. And if at this time, if we can begin to merge with this group, we've got to start somewhere. We've all come from all over the place. People here from Hawaii and England, and I don't know where else, all over the various places around the United States. But what I do know about these groups is that each one that comes here, I can almost say for certain, if you're here at this time, you all have connections together. You may be surprised how much you have in common at certain levels. And if you were to go back into past lives, you've seen how many times you have interwoven with each other before. And you're all been around a long time, most of you. And I can almost say with certainty that you are all have more than likely walked into your bodies, though not necessarily, and sometime in your life, and you are almost more than likely interdimensional beings. So you've come from another dimension, not another planet, another consciousness level, and you've come down here for a purpose and a reason, because that's primarily what one of my main purposes of communicating to these groups like this is to act as a catalyst to remind you of who you are, so that your memories can come back and you can remember where you came from and why you came here and these kinds of things, because this is important for you to finish what you have to do here. In my own life, I was, like everyone else, trying to figure out why we were here and what was going on. I went into the military when I was really young, thinking that might help. It did, actually, because I ended up in Vietnam. I spent 13 months there, long before everything started happening, way back in 1962. And found myself out in the jungles and living in just little shacks, learning. What my job was to teach English to the Vietnamese, because I could speak Vietnamese. And so I spent a long time there, and it was there that for the first time, that I saw someone different than Americans. And I saw amazing nature of the Vietnamese, which is real different. Their hearts are so much more open than ours. I fell in love with them, and I didn't want to return. I didn't know what was about to happen. I was ready to just go off into the jungles and forget it, and just stay there. But I didn't. And when I got back, I was even stronger, wanting to know what was going on, and so I went to college, thinking maybe that would figure it out. And so that's the reason I went into mathematics and physics, trying to figure out what this stuff was out here, and looking in that way. And but by the time I got almost through with that, I realized many things. I realized, first of all, is that I was being communicated with as I was working through there, which was really who I am now. But at the time, I was another person, and I was communicating to this other person while he was going to college, and I was giving him a lot of this stuff. And I gave him an understanding where at one point he realized that what he was being taught in the schools was completely wrong. And that was partly what made him stop. And really there is no wrong or right in this. It's always an interpretation. It's how we interpret things. One day I was, many years later, I guess this was about I had graduated from college, and I was led to go to Canada, and I immigrated up there. I was going to stay there for the rest of my life at that time. It had nothing to do with the thousands of people that were going there because of the war. I had an honorable discharge. I was out of all that. I just went there because I felt that's where I was supposed to go. I went into this valley all by myself. There was nobody there. And the following year, 10,000 Americans came into this one valley where I was. I couldn't believe it. It was like incredible. And it was devastating to the Canadians. It was absolutely devastating what that did to them. But while I was there, for a while, I was living in Vancouver, and my wife and I decided that we were going to begin to search spiritually. And we did many things. We first started out with hypnosis. And we gave each other permission to do hypnosis, and we started working with hypnosis, going in and just studying on our own. And we found out that we could lift out of our body and fly around the room, which was really a lot of fun. And then we found out that we could go downtown and go into libraries and look in books and all kinds of things and come back. And this was getting to be very interesting. Life was getting to be more fun than it was before. And though it didn't have any real answers in itself. And one day, it was actually Yogananda's book, I think, more than anyone else, that got me interested in Hinduism, and I began to study with this particular teacher, and he was teaching us a form of meditation. And this was the first time we got very serious behind this. We made these white silk robes with hoods and all this kind of stuff, and sat down, we were very serious. And and we began with this meditation, not having any idea where it would lead or what it would mean or anything. When something happened to us that wasn't in his book either, the guy, our teacher who was teaching us. And these two very tall angels, we were in this room that had 15-foot ceilings, and these about approximately 10-foot angels appeared in the room. And they were two of them, and one was kind of an ultraviolet light. The other one was sort of a Kelly green, and kind of a bright green. And they were identical, and they were transparent. You could see right through them. Their faces were so bright that I couldn't see the faces. Still can't see the faces. There was so much light coming from that area of their body. And they communicated with us telepathically, because the sound would come from inside of us. And when they first appeared, they actually appeared to my wife first. I didn't see them at first. What I saw is two spheres of light, two round balls about so big, and one green and one purple. And it was only later when I was communicating with my wife, she says, well, I saw those two big angels. You really saw them? I saw those little balls. And it took me a year to see them as angels. I had to work at it real hard. And what they told us was, the very first thing they said when they came in was, we are you. We are not something separate from you, though you are seeing us outside of yourself. We are literally you. We didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what they meant when they said it. This other thing they said was that they had no form at all. They were formless. But they used form, sphericalness or angelness, as a vehicle of communication, to communicate with us. And so that there was something that could communicate in a polarity world. Though, from their point of view, they had absolutely no form at all. Almost all the teachers, though there probably are some exception, and most of the information has come through these angels in this particular way. In so leading me to all these different teachers, they've led me to just about, well, they led me to all 8 of the major religions. I've been Christian and Jewish and Hindu and Tibetan and Taoist and Sufi and Muslim and I don't know what the whole rest of them are, I can't remember all, but I spent time in each one of these to understand what they are, and then many of the offshoots. And the American Indians also have been a very, very powerful influence in all of this. And they give me a view from many different towers. And what I've discovered from all of this is they're all the same. Each person or each one of these religions says, my way is the only way, which is part of the problem here. But if you really go deeply inside of these different religions, their symbols and what they're saying very similar, in many cases identical. Though there's slight different viewpoints, they're still talking about the same thing. They have different names for different stages of awareness. So, in this workshop, I am going to, for the first time, I think, for the first time I'm going to give the entire, I've given little pieces of what happened to me from coming in here. For the first time I'm going to give the entire sequence all the way through. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I think that's going to happen. It's going to be one of the stories. The stories that will be told in all of this, which will be life experiences for me as I interpret them. Most of these stories are going to be outrageous by normal consciousness and normal ways of thinking. If it's too much for you, it's okay. You don't have to believe it. Just take it as a myth or a story or whatever. But do look at its importance in terms of your own life and what it could mean for what we're talking about relative to the subject of this workshop. And throughout all of this, not only in the stories but even in the information, don't believe anything I say. Don't just take it because I'm saying it. Take it in and store it and listen to it, but check it out. See if this is true. All of it. Don't just do it. Find out if it's really true. And along with all the things that I say are possible, find out if they're possible. If they're not possible, maybe they're not for you. But definitely don't just accept something that I say because I've said it. And along those same lines, there's one other thing I got to say, because this happened in Sandpoint, Idaho. There was a little bit of a problem. We're going to talk about the yugas. These are particular ages We are in the Dwapara Yuga right now. We just came out of the Kali Yuga, which is the most asleep point in the precession of the equinoxes. And during the Kali Yuga, it is kind of necessary for those people who are a little more awake than the rest of us to keep others awake during that time. And so the student-disciple relationship was created during that time. But that relationship actually ended about 900 years ago. And it's actually really out of it now. We're into a different stage. And the kind of student guru type relationship is dangerous at this point. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you can still have teachers. There's nothing wrong with teachers at all. But only this total dependence on someone is not, though at one point in our history was necessary, at this point in our history is very dangerous. We are about to pass through certain levels of consciousness where there is not going to be anybody else but you and God. But you're going to find it the same at that point. And you're not going to have someone there to ask, okay, what do I do next? You're going to have to learn how to get what you need to know from within you. And you have all knowledge in you. There isn't anything that isn't known anywhere that you don't have access to. And everything you need to know at any moment is always accessible to you. You just need to know how to access that because we've kind of been hit on the head. We're kind of having amnesia and a little bit unconscious at the moment. And so my job is just to be a catalyst for you. Try to do something very quick and very powerful to try to awaken you to a certain level where from there on in you can not need anybody else but reach within to your own higher self from which you will know exactly what the next step is at moment to moment without having to go outside of your own self. And so I'm no one special, and sometimes I get this from people where they kind of look at me like I'm somebody special. I'm nobody special at all. I'm just another person that right now I'm in the same place you guys are trying to figure out how to get out of here. And I have given up everything that I've had on the other levels to come from the same place that you have. And we're all in this together. And, we're just brothers and sisters. And so it's real important that we don't do that with me or with anyone else. From my point of view, though some wouldn't agree, that Jesus the Christ and a drunk in the gutter are equal. They're exactly the same. Before we ever even start with the screen, I'm going to describe something so we all have the same language. This is this thing about dimensions. We all talk about these other world stuff. We need to get this clear in our minds what that means, at least from the definition that I will give you so that we can all, you may have a different definition, and I don't mean to replace your definition. I'm just going to give one that we can all talk about so we all have something in common. And now when I talk about the fourth dimension or the fifth or 10th or 120th or whatever, I don't mean what most mathematicians would mean, and that is hyperspace going from fourth dimensional tetrahedron, say, to a fifth by warping, changing space mathematically. I don't mean that at all, because from my experience that just simply isn't true. Though you could create those kind of realities, it isn't what life has done at all. Life has separated the different dimensional levels in exactly the same way that it has separated the notes in music. And so, if you're to look at a piano, you've got your white keys and you've got your black keys. And your white keys are your whole notes, which goes, C, D, E, F, G, etc., just whole notes. And then your black keys are your half steps. And your white from C to C is your octave, and your black ones are your pentatonic scale. You've got 5 notes there. And when you add the black ones to the white ones, you get 12 notes in which is called the chromatic scale. So if you get all your sharps and flats in there, you have 12 notes. 13th one is the same note as your 8th note. That's where your octave on your white keys. That's where you come from C to C again. It takes 13 steps to get back there again. And the only difference between each one of these notes in terms of sound is cycles per second. And each one of these notes, if you start at C and you go to C, C sharp, D, etc., the differences between each of the notes are 11 cycles per second, or multiples of them. There are always 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 77, 88 cycles per second. The relative proportions of that are identical. Let me put it another way. There's something called wavelength in terms of either sound or light, which, just so we get this clear, oh great. This is wavelength. Wavelength is simply, this is your axis, the sine wave curve that we're all familiar with, which is really a function of a circle. If you have a circle like this, and you cut it in half, you flip this half over to like that, then you've got this sine wave curve. And the wavelength is how long it takes. If you were to measure this line running down the middle, going from here to here, or from any of the nodal points to another nodal point, let's say from here to here, the length of this is how long. That's called wavelength. Okay, and wavelength is everything in this universe. It's everything in all the universes that are associated with us, without exception whatsoever. There is a zip that aren't a function of wavelength. And wavelength is everything. I can't tell you what it means. If you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, which we are going to in great detail after we've gone a long ways, you're going to see that everything from microwave towers to gamma rays to sound waves to everything is all a function of how long the wavelength is. You change the wavelength and you change the nature of what the energy is. And so with this understanding of wavelength, in other words, this is a long wavelength and this would be a short wavelength. Everybody get that? And a real long wavelength would be so long that there's wavelengths like your brain waves, for example, that are coming out of your head, are so long that they're almost straight lines. Thanks. Hey, I think we're set up here. I bet this works. Let's see. Aha. All right, great. Let's get rid of these guys. So, and you've got little tiny wavelengths, and you've got them so little you can't even see them. There's microwave. They get really, really little, and they get really, really long. And again, your brain waves that are coming out of your head are almost straight lines. And you go to your cosmic waves, and they're so little, they're 10 to minus 18 or something. They're so small that you can't hardly even see them. In quantum physics, you can look at like this pin as either being made up of little tiny particles or made up of you could say sound, wavelength. And if you looked at all the, so there's a very specific what's called a sine wave signature. We saw what a sine wave was. A sine wave signature is, say, something that would look like this. would come up on a computer monitor, or maybe it would look like that, or maybe it would be. There's like a handwriting signature. It's a very specific signature, and every physical object in the universe has its own signature, its own sound wave signature. In fact, it's a language. Some people believe that if, in fact, it is possible, if you absolutely create the signature, you create the object. But if you took all the objects in our universe and they're all putting out their own sound, if you want, and if you average or compute the average of all those sounds, you get 7.23 centimeters long, which is a pretty short wavelength of about so long, like I said, the distance between the eyes. And from my point of view, that's also Om, that the Hindus and Tibetans refer to Om. Om is the sound of the universe. It's the sound of all things at one moment. Well, in terms of looking at the dimensional levels, there are 104, many people, if you talk to various people, they'll refer to these 144 dimensional levels that are in the octaves. Well, what this is again, looking at your music, you have 12 basic notes. And then you have your 13th one, which is the return, or the next octave, going up to the next octave, repeating the same basic things over again. And in between each one of these 12, there are 12 overtones that approximate exactly the larger one, which are holographic in nature. And so sound or electromagnetic light is holographic in nature. You can go within it, just like you can go within any particular point into a table. You can go down at any point down into the microcosm, or you can go above. And it's the same way. This whole octave becomes a note. Like there's larger octaves where the whole octave becomes a note relative to another octave above that one. And because there's 12 of these between each one of these notes, and you got 12 notes, the 12 times 12 produces the 144 dimensional levels. And so you have these 144 dimensions. And so you have 12 primary ones, and these are what in Star Trek you might call subspace. They're real worlds. They're just as infinite as anywhere else. They just aren't whole note universes. And they're just as important. They all have life. All this is filled with life. It's totally. I don't know if there are any. There might be some that are not filled with life, but. And where we sit right now is right here, on the third dimension of an octave. So it does not mean the XYZ axis being the 3 dimensions of space, and then the 4th dimension being time, this kind of concept. Forget that. We just happen to be sitting on the 3rd note of this octave with a wavelength about so long. And if you were to, and our consciousness is tuned to this wavelength, which puts us here. And we are breathing in a very specific way, which tunes us, which is the key, that tunes us to this particular universe. But if you were to change your breathing and to tune your consciousness level to a different wavelength, if you were capable of doing that, you would disappear, literally, body and all, right out of the space and reappear into the one that you tune to. And that whole science has a name, which is called Merkaba. Merkaba is one of the bottom lines of what we're going to talk about in this workshop. Though it's spoken in one word in present day, it's really three words. It's mer, which is light, but it's a very specific kind of light. It's a counter-rotating fields of light. And then there's ka, which in almost all of the ancient languages means spirit. And ba, or sometimes said va, depending on the language it came from. In Hebrew it's va. It means body, though that only holds true if there are bodies. As you move up, you rapidly move into areas where matter is not a part of the relationship. And so it could either mean body or it could just simply mean reality, the taking of a reality or a portion of the reality with you. And so the three words together mean a counter-rotating field of light that contains both spirit and body. And it becomes a vehicle to take you from one dimension into another, one universe to another. This is known everywhere by everybody, except for when you come way, way, way down where like we are, where we're unconscious and we don't remember very much. But everybody else knows. It's like, everybody's totally aware of it. Though the science is known to greater and greater degrees as people progress up further. We're as far down the line as you can get. Down in these two other octaves, this is not even self-aware. We're at the very bottom. This is the lowest possible consciousness in the octave there is of consciousness, and still be self-aware. There's only one level of consciousness underneath us, and that one is actually higher than us. I'll explain that later. So we're the lowest form we're the bottom right now. And so each one of these changes the wavelength, gets actually shorter as you go up in higher energy levels. And kind of like red light has a long wavelength and violet or purple has a short wavelength, and shorter wavelength is higher energy. And as you progress up through the dimensional levels, you go into shorter and shorter and shorter wavelengths. You go this way, they get longer. And of course there's an octave below this, and there's an octave above it. And the octave above it and below it have very specific relationships to each other. But music is the key. Once you know the wavelength of this one, and you know music, you could calculate very precisely all the wavelengths of all the other ones, depending on your accuracy of how good you got that one. And you could know exactly right where they are. And in between these, in between each one of these universes is nothing. It's void. It's absolutely no thing. And there's different kinds of voidness. There's 144 different kinds of voidness, each one having different meaning depending on what one you're in. But it's no matter how you do it, it's nothing. No thing. Only spirit moves through these various levels. And though they have learned how to take matter through these voids up to here. And right there and over here also, there are what many people refer to as the Great Walls. There are these void states here and here that are so great and so deep and so vast in their nature that no thing can pass through them. And so this basic understanding will help when we start referring to various things at different dimensional levels. What this class teaches is how to go from one particular level to another specific level, which lies. There are three worlds, universes, Oh, I'm in the wrong place, sorry. Need a rag here. There are three worlds that sit right here. Oh no, I was right. Third, fourth. 1, 2, 3. They sit right here, right before the fifth dimension. It's the 10th, 11th, and 12th overtone of the fourth dimension. This is the fourth, and this one's the fifth on a chromatic scale. And it's right here that we're going to go from here to there. And this is just above the angelic realms, of which is the 7th, 8th, and 9th overtone of the fourth dimension. And the 10th, and 11th, and 12th is where a particular level of unity consciousness begins to take place. It begins in these levels, though it really doesn't really impact the person making the transition until they get to the fifth. But it's right here where you would call Christ consciousness. There is a body that exists everywhere. And there is only one of these bodies. There is only one Son of God. And this body extends from this point out, and there's you might say an infinite number of beings that are connected to this body, or cells in this body. And it's a very specific understanding, a very specific interpretation of the reality. There's only one reality, but there's a lot of ways to interpret it. And so this is where this particular Merkaba that I'm teaching will take us to go from planet Earth to these very specific places. And from there, you won't need me or anything else, because after that, once you learn how to get there, you will be met by other specific levels of awareness that are connected to you and take you on through the rest of it. And so the job of this workshop is just to make this one little step over to here. And whether or not you go into the 10th, 11th, or 12th doesn't really matter, but you will go according to your nature. There's three different particular levels there. And that's a stepping stone. It's a place to make a translation from there to the fifth, and from then on in you're going to move very rapidly beyond your imagination right now. There aren't any words I can tell you that you can come close to talk about that. We can talk about this kind of, but from there on out, it's just words that don't mean a whole lot about anything except experience. And so this is the essence on a technical level of what we're going to be teaching here. And so now, I'm going to go straight into, now we got that.
When we go to the fourth dimension of the 10th, 11th, and 12th, is it Earth in a higher dimension, or is it someplace totally different?
Yeah, we will be on Earth still. On another, there are many. The dimensions are all superimposed. They're not. You don't go anywhere to get there. All of them, without exception, are right here in my hand. They're all passed through each other, and they're all in the same place. It's a matter of tuning. It's like a television. You got one TV. You change the channel, which all you're doing is changing the wavelength of the reception, and you get a different picture. And so Earth has many dimensional levels, though it's really not that many. It has the third dimensional level. It has there's kind of a vacuum right after the third, but in the fourth there's a lot going on between the fourth and all the way up into. Well, we've got it going all the way up until, we've got some going all the way up until the 12th. At this point, we've even got it over into the 13th, which is incredible. There is the cream of the crop of our awareness has made the Ascended Masters, a small number of our Ascended Masters, has figured out how to get onto the other side of the wall. So Earth has made the leap all the way over here, though it's only a very small number of us. And so we have these different places in there. In terms of the octave, we have a lot of life going on in the fourth dimension. There's a lot going on in the fifth. There's a whole lot going on in the sixth, especially in the last three overtones of the sixth dimension. The 10th, 11th, and 12th overtone is where all the ascended masters reside. There's a whole world there of universe that's there on Earth. And then I think there's only 3 or 4 people who are able to get into the 7th dimension, which is, in terms of the human body, is the pineal gland. And it was their understanding that allowed us to go over to the great wall. There's a huge learning process that's going on with the ascended masters right now. I mean, they're just learning like crazy right now on a lot of things. And so we do have these other universes that are around that the Earth is tuned to. There's got to be somebody there tuned to it. There's got to be a consciousness that's tuned to it. And so there's life there that is tuned to these. It's very complex, and I don't want to get into all of it because it's very complex. You can't speak unless you got the magic wand.
Frequency, sound, to move. We're talking about doing the breathing, which is also frequencies, but there must be a sound wave that can vibrate.
You can, yeah, there is. You can, the technique of the Merkaba that I'm using is based on breathing. There are other techniques around breathing that will do similar things that will work also. The one that I'm using is the primary one. It's the easiest one and simplest one, and it's the one that most people in the universe find quicker. Though there are lots of other ones, it's not the only way. There are other breathing techniques. But the criteria is that all you have to do is tie the information of the Merkaba to any aspect of your physical body. So you could tie it to sound, you can tie it to the human voice. The human voice has the level of frequencies of everything that's necessary to scan this. You could also tie it to other aspects of the body. You could tie it to the very movement of the body through space, if you wanted to. You could tie it to sexual energy and tantra, or to heart rhythms. It has to be something you can control. You have control over. If you can control your heart, then you can use that rhythm. But one of the easiest things to control is breathing, and it has direct relationships. So that's why we use breathing. It's the simplest one. There's a lot of other ones. If you study Shiva in Hinduism through Shiva, you'll see that there are 113 forms of meditation that they teach. And this is very similar to what I'm saying. The first 8 of those 113 forms are breathing techniques. Now they say these are all the meditation techniques that are in existence, according to Shiva. The first 8 of them are breathing, and they're very different patterns, and no matter what the breathing pattern is around the world, they can fit it into one of these 8. And then after that, you've got 104 more. It's actually 100. There's 112 and 1. The first 112 are all male because they have form and they have shape, and you can communicate it from one person to another. You say, this is how you do it. The 113th one is female, and it has no form. So you can't tell someone how to do it. It's just following the heart, and there is no right or wrong way. And so that's different. But the male ways all have, you do it this way, and you breathe this way, and you breathe this way. You got form to it. And the 104 ways after the first 8 are totally unique. They're all primal functions. They're different. I can't remember them all. I can only remember a few, but one of them that when I read it was, of course it's a primal thing. One of them is that you're just sucking your thumb. It's very primal. It's the first thing a baby does, Neil. And for some people, they can suck their thumb and remember their connection to God. Only a few, just one in maybe 200,000 people. I'm just guessing at that. It's only a few. You can, if you start messing around with this stuff before you're ready, you could go into some dimensional level that you're not ready for. And when you do that, what life does, if you show up somewhere where you're not supposed to be, life kind of confiscates you. Just, okay, you got here ahead of time, you just wait now. And it'll hold you there. I mean, you won't be able to move. It'll hold you there until the rest of your consciousness, the rest of the cells made up. For those of you who read the Emerald Tablets, who's read the Emerald Tablets here? A few people. Remember when Thoth was entering into the sixth dimension? He wrote that book 2,000 years ago. And but at that time he was really afraid, because that was when he was just beginning to enter. And of course now they're all living in the sixth dimension. They were just going in there, and when they got in there was the hounds that were chasing them and trying to get them. And if they got them, they would hold them and keep them. They don't kill you. I mean, they just hold you, that's all. They just keep you there for a while. And so you could get detained or arrested if you proceed too quickly and too far, but you won't get hurt. I mean, ultimately, you may have to wait a long time. It would be better to proceed in an organic, not to be in so much of a hurry and experience each one of the steps that we have to. Okay, 2 more questions and that's it. Just these 2 people here.
What is the difference between the successive octaves and getting through the wall just puts you to a new octave?
Well,
the octave?
You see, once... Okay, that's a good question. Remember, I've said that we exist on other. I think I said we exist on other levels when we're talking about the angels being us on one level. You exist on a lot of other levels. Most people exist on anywhere from 5 to maybe 100 or so more other dimensional levels. I mean, literally, you have a counterpart, an aspect of you that is literally there, and it's you. And though most of that is totally conscious of itself, stretched throughout there. It's only this lowest level, us down here, that we're not aware. Though the other aspect of it is aware of you. And if you were to play those notes, if you look at this as like a piano, and you were to play those other worlds that you're on, you would find that they form chords. Almost always. It's really rare, unless you're a terrible piano player. You almost always will be in harmonic, other dimensional levels that are harmonic with the one that you're in. And there's a lot of combinations that can come out of here besides this one. So there's lots and lots of other combinations. But what happens is a person or a little spirit will learn how to play one chord, and then once it figures out, hey, we can make chords, it'll try another one, and then another one, and another one, and pretty soon it learns how to play the piano. And eventually it learns how to go through all 144 dimensional levels. And the key is to be able to go into that world and be conscious and stable and stay there. Because what usually happens when you go into a dimensional world that you're not supposed to be there, it's either going to trap you there or it's going to spit you back out and throw you back out. You can't stay there for maybe more than just maybe a few minutes and experientially, or just a short time, and it'll just, you're really throwing yourself out, which I'll explain later. But it won't keep you, you won't be able to stay there. But after a while, when you slowly start learning how to play the piano, you slowly learn how to go into any of these worlds and be comfortable and stay there. No matter where it is, no matter how high it is or low it is or complex or simple or whatever is going on. And each one of these different universes are visually, experientially, and sensually totally different, absolutely, completely different. Just going from where you're going to go right now to this next one up here, it's so different that it's going to take me a long time to describe it. The colors, there's not even the colors aren't the same. Shape will not be anything like your mind can conceive of right now. Everything will be real different, but between this close of a jump, there are certain similarities. And but as you go up, it really starts changing a lot. And so it takes time and for spirit to eventually get to the place where it can go through all of them. When someone does that, when they finally learn how to do them all, and then they learn how to get onto the other side, and they realize, son of a gun, it keeps repeating itself, and they realize, wow, it's all the same. It just repeats itself. Then a big lesson happens right here for that spirit, and a choice has to be made. At that point, they can see the whole, and they, no matter what octave they're in, they can see the whole from that point, and they either decide long before they ever reach this place, they're going to realize that there is no inside and outside, and that everything that is them, and so there'll be that kind of connection. But when they make this jump, they will really understand that, and because they will have spanned the whole spectrum of this experiment that we're in. And at which point they either are going to, because they know that all life is them, they're either going to make the decision to stay here in this waveform universe and to help all the aspects that are lower to get through and to understand, or in other words, to complete the experiment. They're either going to do that, or they're going to go what the Tibetans call beyond the beyond the beyond the beyond. They're going to leave the whole universe totally, step back outside the system from which it was created, and return into godness, return into the single spirit that created this from before, and from which either way is okay. It just depends on what you choose. If you choose to do that, if you choose to stay here, the name for that is Melquisedek. And it's another level of consciousness that is very much like Christ consciousness, and it is one that is spanned the whole spectrum. And if you do that, the moment you make that decision in your heart, life grabs you real good, and it uses you, and it uses you primarily in dimensional changes and things to do with dimensions, because you're an expert at it. And so whenever there's a problem in any of the worlds or levels, octaves, where there's always little problems, just like there is in your body. When problems happen, then life will use the Melchizedeks to go in and to try to alter or change or do whatever life wants it to do. If you go beyond, you brought with you experience back to that which created the experiment. And so either way, it's okay. But there is a point where you make a decision. If you do choose to stay within the Melchizedek consciousness, you then really can't help yourself anymore, because you've gone as far as you can on that level. There's nothing to do but to go back down into life and to serve and to work and to try to help, because you know absolutely beyond any doubt whatsoever that life is, there's an absolute unity to life, and so you begin to allow God to work through you so that the original intent of the creation unfolds. And many of you in this room are very close to making that decision, and certainly there's a certain completion patterns that you have to do. Though that's not true for most people on Earth. Most people on Earth some of them are still working with the first simple chords down here. That doesn't mean that you're higher than them. It just means because you are them. It just simply means that you are your point of consciousness is going a little bit further down, and so you have more responsibility. That's all, because you just got more to do. Work harder.
So when you talk to the few masters who are right at the
I can't see who's... Oh, okay, over there.
Same place.
Yeah.
The few masters who are right at the wall, and they're learning a whole bunch right now, are they just within this octave, or...
Yeah, they're just within... This is earth consciousness I'm referring to. And earth consciousness is learning how, at the moment, to go through the wall and to make these kinds of decisions. And it's looking like we're all going to be faced with these decisions, because if what we think is true, we are about to make an extremely unheard of, unparalleled, never seen before, rapid change from where we are down here all the way through all these dimensional levels at an extremely accelerated pace. And we don't know why it's happening. We just think, we believe at this point that that's what's going on. And everything's already opening up that way. Happens, it's going to be extraordinary. It's going to be an extraordinary experience. You might hardly wait. Because this is brand new. There's not very many brand new experiences in the universe, but this is a brand new experience. So only every once in a while that God intersects outside the system. And that appears to be what's happening right now on Earth, is that God is directly intervening from outside the system. It's great. Really glad to see it. Yeah. Okay, we'll take that one last question. Then you just speak it out loud.
What is the reason that God is intervening now?
He put this little seed into the universe and created a situation where there was no other way to go. And then when that seed was chosen, then everything is unfolded because of it. So hidden deep in the universe was this little thing, which we'll talk about later. And it's created everything that's happening here the way it's gone. It's like, it's pretty obvious that this is what us on the outside of the system wanted to take place, but why now? I can say why now on certain levels, but why now on the big picture, I have no idea. Okay, one more. You're absolutely right. Yes. Okay, give her the magic wand. And then right after this, we'll cut this one, and this will be the first one.
So why are we here, and what has that seed been implanted in us? Because before I arrived, I kept hearing that word without ever hearing it before.
What word?
Merkaba.
Oh, Merkaba. Well, it's an ancient word, and we all know the sound of it. The Zulus in Africa, when they talk about how they came in. This guy is going around all over the world right now talking about their ancient culture. And he talks about how they come in on these disc-shaped Merkabas, using exactly the same word. It's in their ancient tradition. Or if you go back to Ezekiel in the Bible, or if you go to the sound of that word is ancient, and it's an old one. But why you? When you're talking about you coming here, nobody can answer that question but you. That's why you have. Each person.
There's a group of us.
Well, there are people that are coming from. There's people that are coming from the past. There's people that's coming from within the future. There's people that's coming from into the future. A lot of intersection stuff that's going on here that's usually not done in the kinds, at least to the degree that it's being taken place here right now. There's a lot of things going on. We'll slowly unfold this over the next few days to the best of my ability to explain all the different levels that are going on. But there's a lot of people coming here that are very advanced souls that have real definite purpose why you're here. Though most of you, or many of you, don't know what that is right now. Or you may feel it in your heart. You may not know exactly what it is. And that's part of my job, is to try to jar those memories. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, one more. Definitely.
Just quickly, so I have this clear in my mind. When you reach the 13th step, is it a collective decision of all your aspects to leave or stay? Mm-hmm. Or can you straddle?
It's no longer you like you think of yourself now. And you are something very different than that. But at that point, a decision was made, and exactly how and where you go from there.
So
But it
you
is not
cannot
you.
be in both octaves at the same time. You could not have aspects of yourself in this octave and then go past the 13th and other aspects.
Oh yeah, you can. In fact, when you're on that level, you're capable of being in every single octave simultaneously. Every single overtone. You can be everywhere at once. You begin to get that just by the time you reach the 6th dimension. Here on Earth, you can be in 233 places simultaneously. 233 conversations in 233 different places. When you get in the 4th dimension, each one, they're all different. They're different amounts. But eventually you get to this place where you can be everywhere at once. According to the Dogons, they talk about that there is another star, a dark star, that rotates around Sirius. Now, Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. It's a 4.6 magnitude. And if you were to look at the belt of Orion, which is 3 stars, you could go to your left about so far in the sky, and you come over to this really, really bright star, which is Sirius. If you move the other way, you'll come up to the Pleiades. And according to the Dogons, there's another star that rotates around that star. And they're very, very specific about this other star. They say that it's this very heavy matter, extremely heavy matter that the star is made out of. And that it's an old, ancient star, and that it's real little. And that it revolves around this star. Now this is where a contradiction that I have to check out on my own. Everything I've ever read has said that it was 50 years. And however, a television special just came up recently and said it was 60 years. And I about fell over because I read everything I've ever read, so I was always said 50 years. I'm not sure now. I've got to check this out, but it was either 50 or 60 years. That the star rotated around in either 50 or 60 years. So at one point, not too long ago, we sent a scientific team to these guys to ask them, how do you know this? How do you know this information? Which in a way was kind of a big mistake, because if you realize that their information is correct, then you've got to accept how they got the information, right? But that was as soon as they found that piece of information out, that's when they were shoved under the rug. Because what the Dogon said was, well, this flying saucer came out of the sky, came out and landed on 3 legs, and they got a picture of this in the cave also, and that the beings in the ship made a big hole in the ground, they filled it with water, and they jumped out, and they looked like dolphins, and they came up to the edge of the water and talked to them, and told them about the planet, this is where they came from. This is what they said. And the scientists just said, nah. And just shoved it under the rug. But this was the picture that they gave to them. They called them the Nomo, N-O-M-O. And that they were half in and out of water, and they breathed air, and they had the fin facing this way, which is the only, there's no fish that have this, only the animals, the cetacean nation, has the fin. I forgot what's that called when it's got a name, when it's facing this way. And so these were cetaceans, these were air-breathing animals that came out and lived there. And they were dolphin-like, anyway, put it that way. You cannot say for certain that they were dolphins. And they said that when the Nomo came here, that a new star appeared in the heavens, and that it hung in the sky over them, and that the Nomo said that they came from the star, which was really the mothership they came down from, and that as soon as the Nomo left, when they left and did this, the star disappeared. So this is a very interesting little bit of information. There was another bit of information that was extraordinary that was given to the scientists and was studied by a group of Australian astronomers. They said that this was the image, that this image was given to them a long time ago. Now, realize that Dogons lived near Timbuktu in northern Africa in the desert, and they're talking about dolphins, right? And this information has now been traced way back into ancient Egypt and further back into Sumeria, which we'll talk about later. This may be more ancient than what Robert Temple has up in here. But anyway, this particular pattern was given to them, which they said was the view of A and B from Earth. It's now called Sirius A and Sirius B. And Sirius A, it isn't A or B, which is the little dark star, moves around Sirius A like this. It's a more complex pattern. There's a third place in space, and Sirius B moves like this, and Sirius A moves like this around it, and the two make a double helical pattern as they move through space in this complex pattern, which according to computers in Australia is identical to the DNA molecule. And they found that, again, an amazing little thing. But what was real interesting is that this pattern, which is at least 700 years old, happened to be a specific time thing. In other words, when it's put into computers, that ever-changing pattern from Earth, that this specific pattern was exactly from the year 1912 to 1990. And those are real important dates, those particular dates, especially 1912. When we talk about the Philadelphia experiment and stuff later on, that was a very important moment in our history in 1912. And so why the dolphins wanted to know exactly about this particular time, I don't know for sure, except that it is very pertinent to us. And this happened to be the time when we were even aware of the pattern. We wouldn't even known what the pattern was before, if they were giving us one earlier than that. So, just realizing this is one little bit of information showing that maybe there's something else going on in our history other than what the history books. In 1985, I was giving took a tour of people, a small group of people, through Peru. And we went along, one of the things we were going to do was to go along the Inca Trail, the original Inca Trail, which is about 40 miles through the jungle, 14,000 foot peaks and stuff, drops down into Machu Picchu. And the night before we were going to take, you have to take this little train out in the middle of nowhere and then leap out the windows of this train. Because they'll stop for 30 seconds to take off again. And get out of this thing, and where you begin the trip. The night before this took place, we were in a place called Cusco, which is it's a city in the shape of a puma, a cat. And we were in this very fancy hotel, a 4-star hotel. I don't remember, well, the name of it will come up here in a minute. And I was, with one of the people I was traveling with was one of these people that had been on one of the expeditions over to Dogon tribe. And he was telling me a lot of stuff about this. And he was telling me how the number 23 was so important to the Dogons. Because the star Sirius dips below, from the northern hemisphere, it dips below the southern hemisphere, at least from Egypt, put it that place, on the 23rd of July, and stays down, or excuse me, it dips below a couple months earlier than that, but it rises up above the horizon on the 23rd of July. and it's called the helical rising of Sirius. At that particular moment, early in the moment, right before the sun comes up, in fact 60 seconds before the sun comes up approximately, the star Sirius rises above the horizon and it comes up a ruby red star. And then 60 seconds later, the sun comes up directly behind that, which blocks it out. And so at that moment that the sun rises, you have in deep space, you have the star Sirius, our sun, and the Earth in a straight line. And that was the first day of the Solstice calendar, which was the Egyptian calendar, and many other ancient calendars were based on the helical rising of Sirius. Why they chose that, we don't know. But as this unfolds about Sirius here in a few minutes, you'll become pretty good idea why they chose that particular moment. Anyway, I'm sitting in Peru, feeling like I'm in Peru right now. It's getting colder in this room. Is it possible to come up at least a couple degrees or so? And we get room 23, of course. And we go into room 20, and he's telling me, hey, we got room 23, good sign, all this whole thing. We go into room 23, and on the bed was this symbol in Peru. And I remember standing there for about 5 minutes looking at this, and we're trying to figure out the link in our, we didn't say anything, we just looked at this bed for about 5 minutes, trying to figure out how that symbol had got from the Dogons in Africa over to Peru. And because it was the same one. And or very, very, very close to it. In fact, this is it was the Hotel San Agustin International, Cusco, Peru. And I went around to all the people and I said, people work there, what does this mean to you? Well, it has something to do with our creation, but they didn't know. They were almost all Spanish that ran this thing. They didn't really know the creation stories of the Indians that were behind us. It wasn't until I got to Lake Titicaca, and it was it wasn't the Quechuan, it was the ones that float out on the islands out there. Euros, what they are? I can't remember. Anyway, there's an island tribe that they live on reeds. They build their islands daily by putting reeds, and they float on these islands. They got these whole cities out there, with buildings and cars and everything else. No cars. No cars. But there's buildings, metal buildings and everything else floating out on these reeds out there with houses and homes and chickens and goats and everything else out there. And they did it a long time ago to escape being killed, and they just stayed there. It's real weird when you're walking on these things because you look off and there's water right there, and they're saying, now walk where we walk, and we're walking exactly where they walk, because if you walk in the wrong place, and you just... They lost somebody a week before. They kept saying, no, we lost somebody a week before, so stay real close. I was walking exactly where they walked. Anyway, they told us that, oh yeah, they knew what this was, and they said that was the creation symbol. And pretty soon after a while, we started talking to other Indians, and they all had the same story, pretty close. But which are the actual written records of our history. Very similar story about dolphins somehow having to do with the creation of this area. If you want to read an article, which I have here, this also came out of Australia. It's called Our Father Who Art in Water, and which is a lot of the dolphin data that has been gathered from around the world. If you read this article, which I guess we can copy or something, I don't have it, it's a pretty thick one here, it'll really amaze you, because all over the world a similar story is told. How dolphins have had an amazing influence in the creation of a lot of the ancient cultures, especially around the Mediterranean, from Greece to lots and lots and lots of places there, not just Greece, there's a lot of other places that they've had a deep influence. And their influence on Australia has been very, very powerful. The original ships that landed in Australia, the lead ship was called the Serie. And it's now called Serie's Bay, where they landed. And the star Serie stars on the Australian flag. And there's more dolphins around the continent of Australia than anywhere else in the world. No one knows how many, of course. There's a lot of dolphins in the world. I don't know if you know how many dolphins. Most people think there's a few dolphins out there in the ocean and they're endangered and you've got to be careful. That's far from the truth. There are certain species of dolphins that are endangered, like the pink dolphins of the Amazon River, and there's a few other ones that are endangered. But by and large, we've got, 5.5 billion people in the world? That's nothing compared to the dolphins. There's 7 dolphins minimum for every person. There's at least 35 billion dolphins in the waters. That's a conservative estimate, and there may be as many as 50 billion dolphins in the waters. It's incredible. And they're a race of beings from another place, as we unfold here. And they're on a level of consciousness so far beyond where we're at now that we can't hardly talk about it. Anyway, I will talk about it. But they probably had a big influence on us at one point. I'm going to change the subject a little bit here and go to, this is out of the Clarion Call magazine, Mathematics and the Spiritual Dimensions by David Osborne. I don't know if David was the one who first came up with this or not, but he was the one that reported it. The Sanskrit language has been around a long time. It's one of the oldest languages in the world, so we're talking about going about maybe close to 6,000 years old. And for a long time, there were a lot of these little poems that were in the Sanskrit language, and eventually at one point they translated the language, and when they interpreted the poems, they believed that that was it, that they had finished their job, that once they had interpreted the poems, that was all there was to the poems, until recently. And I guess this has been maybe, I'm guessing 4 or 5 years ago. They discovered that the Sanskrit had numerical value to the various sounds. Again, remember ka was spirit, and ka happens to be either 0 or 1. But you have all these different sounds that are possible in there, and there is a numerical value associated with each one of these sounds. And in this particular poem, and they're unfolding this now in all of them, I guess, they took the various sounds and put the numerical value to them. Now, I don't know how they figured out the numerical value. Don't ask me that. You'll have to go back and research their things. But when they did that on here, they found something that was rather amazing. They found pi with 32 digits of accuracy. Now, these are supposedly hairy barbarians back there, who were just emerging out of the nothingness kind of from our present day thinking. How could they possibly create accuracy of 32 digits? This is it right here. Only there's no decimal point, so it's really pi over 10. So they don't know where the decimal point is. But to that kind of perfection, could not be a coincidence. Impossible. The coincidence, if that was a coincidence, that would even be more ridiculous. And yet, there's proof that they had the ability to do that, right back from the very, very beginning. Well, there's way back there in the beginning, there was all kinds of things that archaeologists and people who study these things really don't understand, at least most of them, don't really know how it's even possible. So how could they have known all these things? somebody's not telling us the truth here. Something is, something just isn't right. For those of you who are Edgar Casey fans, and, from the ARE and this kind of thing, is anybody here from that? A few people? Edgar Casey talked about the halls of records and how that someday these records would be opened and that they would prove that there had been cultures, vast cultures on the earth, way beyond our imagination right now. No, not beyond our imagination, because they're still third dimensional, we can imagine it, but beyond our belief almost. And that have lived on Earth going back 5.5 million years. And according to Thoth, who is the person we'll talk about, we actually have cultures on this planet going back 500 million years. Way, 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 way beyond where we're at now. This is nothing compared to where we've been before. But with no traces, or almost no traces left, which will explain why there's no traces of it right now. And then according to Casey, this would be the key that would open up the halls. You see, and the halls are where these physical records are that can be carbon dated and even further in other ways to date back to prove that these things are ancient. And also, you can still use them, and they can do things that we can hardly believe, which will prove that they were vast sciences way back in then. And this would be the opening. And the opening, they said, would be in the right paw of the Sphinx. And for a long time, they thought that was sort of an arbitrary place, just the right paw of the Sphinx, so what? But it's not arbitrary. You'll see, it's all of this has there's logic and meaning behind all of this. And the records are not held just on physical objects. The records are held on many dimensional levels surrounding this. So I find it very appropriate that even though books like Robert wrote and a lot of other things, and there's lots of other things, you could keep going on in this for a long time, there's a lot of other stuff that has come up that has challenged the belief systems of the history, that this happens to be the object that actually cracked the egg. It was this one that did it. Not any of these other things. That. And it was in 1990 when that began, which happens to be the year that Thoth said, I'm not sure if Edgar Casey said it or not, Thoth said that 1990 would be the year that the halls would begin to open. And again, 1990 was the year that the Dogon put the final point on. The information that you're about to, most of the information, especially having to do with history and these kinds of things, a lot of the stuff comes from this man. Now, the things that I'm about to tell you are fantastic by normal ways of thinking. Again, you'll have to see for yourself if what I'm saying is true or not. But this is hieroglyphics here. It's written on papyrus paper, which is supposedly the first paper. He was the person, according to Egypt, that introduced writing to the world. Egypt supposedly started approximately 500 years later. It's not true. It started simultaneously with Sumeria, and that'll eventually be proven here real soon. But right now, and I'll explain why there's this 500-year difference at the right moment. But both Sumeria and Egypt started at the same time, but they were started from two different sources. One was called Mommy, the other was called Daddy. That which created us as a race before came back to start unfolding who we are. But this whole thing is hieroglyphics. It's a form of writing. Hieroglyphics means holy writing. And it's all hieroglyphics, not just this up here, but this too. This is a symbol which means a very specific person. And in Egypt, his name was Thoth, spelled Thoth. And he doesn't look like that. He doesn't have bird head on his body. That's the hieroglyphic that represents him. He looks very much like, he would look Egyptian if you see him today. And he's holding two reeds in his hand, which are the papyrus reeds. And he's holding an ankh in his hand, which is one of these, which is a symbol that represents eternal life. In any of the hieroglyphics, when a man is holding that or a woman is holding that, it means they've reached immortality. They're no longer ever going to die. And by the way, immortality has a definition from our point of view. It does not mean someone who lives in the same body forever and ever and ever and ever. That's called a trap or something. Not going to do that. Immortality means that your memory pattern and your consciousness has no more break in it anymore. You have total memory going back to the moment, at least to the moment that you began immortality, and your memory and your consciousness has no break, no matter where you pass through. There's no loss. Like right now, we die and we go into particular overtime of the fourth dimension. We forget that we're here once we're there. And then when we come back this way, we forget that we came from there, we're back over here. Keep making the cycle, forgetting each time, though it's accessible because it's in our, it's magnetically held, so it's possible to reach into these ancient memories, old memories, but we keep forgetting. But once you reach immortality, there's no more forgetting. So you can leave and you can die at will when you want to. You can leave a body, you can go into other, because as you will go on, you will find that there's other bodies that are more appropriate for higher levels of consciousness than this one. And at some certain points you'll realize that you don't need any body at all. And, but the consciousness continues on. But this person here, he considers himself an earth person. In truth, we are all from somewhere else other than earth. Because earth, earth, we're all from somewhere, not necessarily from earth. But he considers himself that because that's where he gained his immortality, was here. And he gained it during the time of Atlantis, approximately 52,000 years ago. He has remained in the same body for 52,000 years and has walked on Earth for 52,000 years, walking around. And he could have left here and gone on with one of the past cycles if he really wanted to. But he chose to stay here, very much, for you Hindus out there, very much like a bodhisattva now, where he realized that we were all connected, and he decided to stay back, even though he could go on, and be a teacher, and to help the lower aspect come up. And he just left, though. At least part of it did, anyway. And he made this transition over this octave, along with 31 other beings who made the first time ever of this consciousness level up into the higher levels. And so anyway, a lot of this is going to be coming from this one particular person. A great deal, about 50% of it is coming from there. And when I got here, one of the first things I did was connect with him. And then at the right time, when I needed to know the histories of the earth, he gave me the histories, because he had such a long memory. His mom is 200,000 years old. She's still walking around also on the earth. And so he has a long memory pattern going back pretty much to the beginning. Though he says that something happened 5.5 million years ago that was really big and could never explain to me exactly what it was, or I couldn't understand what it was. And something big time hit the earth, because we can't get through to the ancient memories before that. And I don't understand, from my little point of view where I am right now, I don't understand how that's possible. Because once you create an action or something happens, it goes into what's called the Akashic Records. Mathematically, if you strike a bell, that bell will never go away. It's called asymptotically reaching a limit. Mathematically, it will theoretically exist forever. And And it should still be attainable if you could track down through the Golden Mean Spiral to the place where it started. But something happened, must have been really big, and they can't get through. And so none of the ancients can get through this. They can't consciously go back, though there are records that go back. They still can't consciously go back like they can for the first 5.5 million years, according to him. Anyway, this is his symbol, which is an ibis bird. I think there's several reasons why they chose that, but one of them is because it hangs out in the reeds all the time. The second time I was in Egypt, I went all over looking for one of these ibis birds, looking through all the reeds. And I must have went through about 5 miles, went through reeds. And never could find one of these guys, and never did see one anywhere, not even from a distance. I had to wait till I got back to the Albuquerque Zoo. And that's an ibis bird right there. They look like little sort of pink, short storks. And here's Thoth writing. This is an actual hieroglyph of him writing on one of the walls in Egypt, and laying down the writing. We didn't need writing until a certain point. When the consciousness got to a certain level, then we had to use writing. Before that, we had 100% absolute total holographic memory. There was no reason to do it. Anything that any person ever experienced, anybody else could re-experience at any time that they wanted to. And we still have people like that on the earth right now, today. There's whole groups of them. One of them is the Aboriginals in Australia. Those people are all linked together in a very specific level of consciousness. And they can, if one of them were here in this room right now, then in essence I would be giving it to all of them. They can go into what they call dream time and come in, and it's a holographic world. They would be able to walk around in here and look at this happening. They could experience the whole 5 days, as many as they wanted to. And but it would not be real. It would be like a hologram. It would be like light. It would not be real. It would be, they couldn't remove things or use things, but it would be like hologram. But it's a perfect memory. They could smell, they could hear the sounds. It'd be just like being here. But it wouldn't be real. So we obviously didn't need writing when you got that kind of memory. It was only when we jumped up to the next level of consciousness, which is where we are now, which is a stepping stone from one unity consciousness, which was the first one, to the next unity consciousness, which we call Christ consciousness. And both of those also have unity consciousness, only Christ consciousness is memory. Memory is the key to all of this. The memory of the Christ consciousness body is much greater. If the Aboriginal could come into this room and they would be remembering it, but from like a light field. If the Christ conscious being remembered the room, they would literally be here in time and space. It's a little different. They would just appear. They'd be here. If they remembered an orange, if an Aboriginal remembers an orange, then he's got an orange, but he can't do anything with it. If a Christ conscious being remembers an orange, he's got a real orange. He can pick it up and peel it. So obviously, whatever his memory extends through all time and space and everything that's ever occurred. So all things are possible. It's a whole other level, and there's levels beyond that. Our memory, we are in a separate state. This is the stepping stone. We contain within us the parameters of Christ consciousness, which I'll geometrically be able to show you at the right moment. But we are not Christ consciousness, and but we're a stepping stone in that someone from the first level of consciousness steps into this level of consciousness and then gets out of it as quick as possible to the third one. Have to pass through here, but you don't want to hang out here, because we are not a harmonic consciousness, and we will destroy any place that we are in. i.e. look at the Earth. Just give us enough time and we would completely kill this planet. And it's just the way we are because we are not harmonic. And I have to explain a lot to explain what that means before I can get to that place. And writing is the key. That's how you take someone from the first level of consciousness and get them out into the second level. You introduce writing where they no longer access memory directly from within themselves, but they have to go through a symbol or a word or a color or a form or a shape, which is how our memory is. We have to access something. We can't even remember something unless we check. Our eyes have to move at very specific angles, even to remember things, which is connected to shape and form. And we don't have that ability. And as soon as you do that, then that is part of. There's something else that changes, which is the breathing pattern itself. And we result in this separate state that we see now, where we see ourselves in a body, and everything out there feels to be separate from us. And we think that we could have thoughts and feelings, and that somehow it doesn't affect anything out there, which is illusion. It isn't true at all. Because our thoughts and our feelings dramatically affect what's out there. But anyway, a lot of these things I'm just lightly touching on. I'm going to go over later in detail. So writing was the key in all of this. This was his wife, Shizak, who was also one of my teachers. She was the one that brought me here in the first place, about 3,500 years ago. And she's also a recorder, recording from the feminine view rather than the male view. South was, when South first came to me, he first appeared to me, I believe it was in 1972. And the angels had come to me and they had given me his, well, they didn't give me his name. They gave me the name of this guy named Wilf Chipman, who was a Canadian in British Columbia, and told me I was to go there. And I studied alchemy with him for 2 years. And he was really doing it. Though he wasn't sure himself that he was really doing it. He really was. He figured out how to turn mercury into gold, which is just, the process itself is not as important, but the understanding of how it does that. So you can apply it from this level. It's really the process of how this level of consciousness goes into Christ consciousness. And by understanding how mercury goes into gold or lead into gold, you can understand how that takes place on a human level. The truth is that alchemy is not just that, though it's been centered on that. All chemical levels whatsoever, and all chemical reactions have their counterparts in human experience. Though alchemy is pretty much focused on this one step because it's the most important one for us at this time. I studied this with him for 2 years. He had a little house like a little ordinary house in Burnaby, Canada. And I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I'll say it. And up in this room, he had this bubble machine, this machine filled with this liquid, and mercury would rise in there, and as it would change different colors. And when it got to the top, it would turn to solid gold and sink back down. So you had these little bubbles coming up and turning into gold, and they'd collect a whole bunch of gold out of there. And every day he'd collect these things up. And he built this chemistry lab downstairs. So you would go into this house, like your ordinary house, and you go into this closet, and you go down this elevator into this incredible space age downstairs that he'd spent millions of dollars on building this place hidden to the rest of the world. And it was huge. It was about the size of this whole room in here, filled with everything you can think of, electron balances to everything that you ever need or want. And anyway, I was studying alchemy with him, and about 2 years down the line one day, pretty far down the line, we were in Nelson, British Columbia, and he wanted to teach me a particular meditation, and so I sat down and learned this meditation. It was an open-eyed meditation where we were looking into each other's eyes. And as I started doing this meditation, we did it for about an hour or two. I don't know how long it was in time, but it was a long time that we're staring. And the room had gone away and everything. All there was just sort of his eyes I was looking at. But then suddenly, something happened that never happened before, and he just disappeared. And at first I thought it was just a phenomenal effect of my eyes, watching this guy's eyes for so long. And he was gone for a long time. And finally I reached over and I kind of went like this. And there was nobody there. He was just gone. And I was like, wow. And, but this time my concentration was back in the room. I was really looking at the spot, and there was nobody there. And after a few minutes, this person reappeared there. Just appeared. And only it wasn't him. It was somebody else. Totally different. It wasn't even close. And he was about 35 years old. This guy was maybe 65 or 70 years old. And he wasn't Anglo white type. He was dark-skinned. And he looked very Egyptian. And he was not very tall, maybe 5'3" or 4. And he was clean-shaven, but with a long beard that was tied in 5 places and down off his chin. Real thick, tied down. And he wore very simple tan, long-sleeve pants and shirts that looked like they're made out of cotton. Real simple clothing. And the thing that got me about this person that just grasped my heart was his eyes. He didn't have anything going on. Everybody's got stuff going on, so it's kind of hard to look at some people's eyes because there's more stuff going on. If you look into their aura, you see more and more stuff. But when he didn't have anything. It was just like looking into the eyes of a baby. If you look in baby's eyes, you can look in there, it's okay to look down in there, it's really okay. And that's just how he was. I never ever met an adult like that before. Not even any of my teachers, nobody. I'd never seen that before. And I was really impressed with that. And he told me that there were 3 atoms missing in the universe, and wanted to know if I knew where they were. I don't really know. And so he gave me a very interesting experience, which I'm not going to talk about here, but when I got back from that experience, I understood what he meant. And I said, okay, I understand. I told him what I learned, and he just smiled and bowed at me and disappeared again. And a few minutes later, my alchemist teacher came back. And I never knew who that guy was. I was studying with 5 different teachers at that time, and 4 other ones besides Wilf. And so when the angels who were coming in 2 and 3 times a day at that point, I never asked them who he was, and time went by, and I didn't do it initially, and so as time went by, I just kind of let it go, and he never came up again. And months went by, and then years went by, until finally it was 12 years went by, and one day, 12 years later, he reappeared. And my life changed dramatically. That was on November 1st of 1984. And which I will tell the story at the right time about what happened when we came back in. Okay, Seth came in, and back in. Again, he was gone for 12 years. He came back in 1984, in November 1st. And over a period of several months, he began to teach me or instruct me in sacred geometry. I had been instructed from the angels from the very, very first. It was the angels who actually gave me the breathing that we're teaching here. And they taught me a great deal of the sacred geometry. But when he came in, he says, okay, I want to see what you got. And I just gave it to him, and it's like a little ball of white. And he looked at the whole thing and told me that I was missing a whole lot. And so he sat me down every day for several months. He would come into the room, sit down with me on a pillow, and have me make drawings. And I did this for day after day after day after day after day. And after a long period of time, I came up with this drawing here, which was the end result of maybe 3 months of work or something. And of course, this is after I was in I'd already been working for 12 years, and then I came up with this one. And when he got done, he said this was a very special sacred geometry drawing. It was one of the most important ones. It was the first chromosome in the human body. Each of your chromosomes are actually geometrical patterns. And in the geometry of the patterns, which you will understand this when you get done here, in the very geometry of the chromosome is contained the instructions on how not to just make the human body, but the entire reality. Everything. Only there are certain levels that are missing. There are certain aspects that are missing. The first time that consciousness is self-aware, which we were talked about as the Australians, they have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. When it jumps up one more, we gain 2 chromosomes and we go to 44 plus 2 is what we have. When we go to Christ consciousness, we'll gain 2 more chromosomes and go to 46 plus 2. And then there will be this state further down the line where we will go to 48 plus 2, and then finally the 5th state that we pass through these 5 states, will come to 50 plus 2, 52. And by the way, when I first put this out, which was over 7.5 years ago, there was no scientific proof whatsoever that what I was saying had any basis in biology at all, until in the last couple of years, someone tested the Aboriginals in Australia. No one's ever done it. I guess nobody ever figured out and found out that they all have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. They don't have 44 plus 2, I guess. And since then they found a couple tribes in Africa, I understand, that also have the 44 plus 2. Got many different names all around the world and in various places of the universe, but the one that he called it was the flower of life. Though it's also been called the language of silence and the language of light. Because it is a language, as you're about to see, and it's a language that's hidden underneath, like the words that I'm saying right here. A statement that was pretty outrageous from normal ways of thinking. He says, everything is in here. All the laws of physics, all structure, all crystal structure, all biological life forms in the very shape of every little detail in their bodies, all the planetary bodies, all atomic structure, everything, the entire reality, everything that created it was in this one single image. And that sounds like a pretty powerful statement until you really begin to see how this works, and at which point you'll begin to at least get a feel for that may be true. When he got done teaching all this, he then told me that I would find this image in Egypt. And there was 2 times when I doubted him. And I doubted him on that one because I thought I had read just about everything there was in Egypt, and that did not look like an Egyptian symbol to me. It looked more Christian or something, but it did not look Egyptian. And he just said, "You'll find it in Egypt," and left. And since then, by the way, we found it all over the world, just about everywhere. You'll see at the very end of this, you'll see some of the places that we found it in, but almost everywhere. And 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in Taos, New Mexico, in Smith's food store, buying some groceries, And Katrina Raphael, this friend of mine who writes books on crystals, was in there. And I had taken her to Egypt the first time she went, and she had just come back from Egypt the second time. And she's a woman who takes a camera and just starts, loading it up and she takes pictures. And she was sitting there at the counter taking 36 out at a time and put them on a stack, and she had a stack of pictures a good 12 inches high or so. She was still stacking them up when I came up to her. And we started talking and saying hello, how you doing, and that kind of stuff. And she said she just got back from Egypt. And then she says, oh, by the way, she says she has an angel that has guided her into writing the books that she wrote and gave her the information that she wrote and told her how to get the information through the crystals that she wrote. And I believe that angel's name is Sorel, I think. But anyway, she said that Sorel told her when she was in Egypt that she was to give me a photograph as soon as she saw me. And I said, oh, okay, give me the photograph. And she goes, well, I don't know which one it is. So she turns around away from the things, goes to them and pulls one out at random and hands it to me. And when she did, she handed me this photograph, which was the flower of life on one of the oldest walls in Egypt. That wall's about 6,000 years old. And she didn't know, at that time, she didn't know what I was doing. She had no idea. That thing didn't mean a thing to her at all. But to me, it was like wow. If you could pick one photograph in the world, that one, you got me pretty good on that one. And later, I went to that place. I went back again. I had to go there once I found out it was there. I had to go find out what was there. And I went back again, and where that was located, this is in Abydos here. And this is from the Dog Star here. Which is serious. And behind, this is Serie, the first temple in Abydos, and behind that, there's actually 3 temples. There's a Serie, the first temple goes like this. There's 3 temples. This is where we're looking right at, like this right now. And there's a real ancient, one of the oldest temples in all of Egypt sits back here. It's called the Osiris. It's where Osiris supposedly was put back together. If you know that story where he was cut into 14 pieces. And this was like a really holy place to the ancient Egyptians. It was so holy that many of the kings in the olden days didn't have them, like Zorser, for example, who was men, the same person. He didn't bury himself in Saqqara, which is, he had himself buried here. And a lot of the old kings did that. Even though they built these huge things that would look like that's where they would do it, they had themselves buried here or around here. Well, so Serie the First was building this because of this. And as he was building back in here, there was a little hill here. And as he was building into here, he discovered an even more ancient temple that they didn't know about here. And so he turned his temple and made an L-shaped temple, which is the only L-shaped temple in all of Egypt, which is part of the proof that he didn't build this. Some people think that he faked this, but there's controversy over whether he did this or not. But this is, to me, is proof that he did not do it. Nowhere else has anyone ever made this L. He did the L so he wouldn't have to go in here and mess up that other one. And there's one thing I want to say before I go into those temples in the back. This is the inside of the Serie, the first temple. And what they have discovered in Egypt in the last few years, there's writing that goes to within maybe from your knees all the way up to the top of this 35-foot ceiling or whatever that is up there, and even up on the pillars way at the very top. And when you go to, who's been to Egypt here? Okay, there's quite a few, about 10, 12 people. You notice that you go into these temples, and many of the figures that are on the wall, that are in either relief or whatever, however they're on there, have been chipped away or destroyed. And for a long time, they may have told you, I don't know, that it was because of the Romans and other people who had come in there had destroyed these things. They now know that's not true. They know it's not true beyond any doubt whatsoever, though they didn't know for a long time, because they've discovered in recent times that the language on the walls was placed there in such a way that there was a time frame. The language that is from roughly about this high down was speaking of the past. And from about this high up to maybe 9 or 10 feet, or maybe even 12 feet up the walls, was the present at the time the temple was built. And the stuff that is up further is future, what they think is going to happen in the future. And they now know that who did it, because there's only one person who could have known who did it, or one group of people, and that was the priests themselves that created the temples or took care of the temples. They were the ones that went around and destroyed the writing on the walls, because only the writing that was at the present time of the temples was touched. The past and the future was not touched. And somebody just going in there, like the Romans, just to go in there and cause hell, would not have known that, or could not have picked that out so carefully to just touch the present. And to them, what they put on those walls was, when they wrote what was going to happen in the future, that was just it. That's what was going to happen. And if you don't believe that they can't see what was going to happen in the future, you're going to see a slide at the very, very end of this. I don't know how it came up for those of you who saw the videos. You probably couldn't see it very clearly or not, but you'll see this one very clearly. There's going to be a slide at the very, very end of here. I'm going to wait till the end. I've got to make it dramatic. It's more fun that way. And that slide's going to be way up high up off of one of these pillars, way up there at the very, very top. And it'll be proof that they could clearly see into the future, no doubt. But you have to wait till we get there. This is the Siren Temple, which is this one back here. And it's very, very old. You're not supposed to go down in there, but I couldn't stand it. So I dropped off this thing and ran inside and took a whole bunch of pictures before they dragged me out of there. And I just had to see in there. The writing is so simple. It's so beautiful. It's just straightforward and clear. There's no junk in the middle. The writing in Egypt and in Samaria, when it came out, was in its absolute, most sophisticated, perfect form, and then degenerated after that. Got worse. Came out in its absolute clearest form with no evolutionary pattern before. It just came out in one day. Just one day, suddenly, it's perfect writing on the walls, with nothing leading up to it. No evolution, absolutely zero, both in Samaria and in Egypt. And then got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And they never could understand that. You'll understand it in just a little bit, why it got that way. Anyway, they got me out of there, and when they did, I went over to here. And this is the one, that's the back of the Serie, the first temple. And I'm standing right now here, taking a picture toward here. And this temple was also called the Siren Temple, And it was dedicated to resurrection, according to the hieroglyphics that are found in here. And there's this ramp right here, and it was over here where that flower of life pattern was found. Now, this is the building when they first excavated it, and it was dry in there now. The Nile has changed its level and is filling up with water. And they talk about these 3 steps, where these steps came up this way, a thing in the middle, and the steps go back down again. These 3 different levels, which are associated with the 3 levels of consciousness, the 42, the 44, and the 46, that we're going through, which are all associated with resurrection. And this temple, this was done by Lucy de Lubitz, which was Swallow de Lubitz's daughter. She reconstructed the temple from a blueprint plan, and then discovered that it was based upon the sacred geometry of 2 back-to-back pentagons. She wasn't exactly sure why, all she knew that it was. But today, when we start talking about the grids, you'll discover that the grids I'm talking about, actual electromagnetic fields of energy that exist around the Earth. Primarily, these grids exist from about an average of about 60 feet in the Earth, average, to about 60 miles above the Earth. Every life form on the planet, even if there's only 2 bugs, has a grid stretching around the whole Earth. And these grids are all superimposed, stretching up for these 60 miles up, which causes like this light blue glow around the Earth. And the highest ones are the whales. And then the dolphins come after that, and then the humans. And there's 3 primary human ones. And the newest one, which was just finished in 1989, after 13,000 years of work of constructing it, is based on a stellated dodecahedron. And a stellated, though we haven't talked about these kind of things yet, this is a dodecahedron. It's 12 pentagons. And this is an icosahedron, and if you notice in here, there's another pentagon, and with five triangles in it. You can see the similarity between these 2 shapes. If you were to take this out of there, this is called an icosahedral cap in sacred geometry. And when you open up a icosahedral cap, it's these 2 back-to-back pentagons like this. And the icosahedral cap is the key to the Christ consciousness grid. Because if you take a dodecahedron and put one of these in each one of these things here, that's what the primary shape of the Christ consciousness grid is. And so it was very clever of them, from my way of thinking, to base the geometries of this on something that would eventually, that they clearly understood even back then, and were in the process even back then of building, and knowing that someday would be completed. This is the place where it was found, which was right here. And I had a little better camera than Katrina had. And you can see that there's actually 2 of these side by side here. And I took a shot right next to it over here. And though I know you can't see this real well, this one here is called the seed of life, which we're going to look at in just a little bit here. And there's all kinds of patterns all around here, which are all based on this geometry. I put my camera around the side like this over here. I couldn't get around here because there was water and everything in there, just to see what was over there. And again, this is the backside. You can see this. I know you can't see these real well, probably from where you are, but these are all symbols that you'll find all over the world and in churches and everywhere. And they're all understandings or what stuff that you're going to learn about in this workshop right here was on this wall. It was almost like this was a school that they were teaching this kind of stuff. After you go to one of these workshops and you go back there and you stand at the Silent Temple and you see all the symbols, you get this weird feeling because it's so familiar. I mean, it's just like, holy cow. I mean, it's just like, you know what's on the walls. You know what they're talking about. And it's just, and they're talking about everything. Way over there, and this is with an 80 millimeter lens, way over here, there's this image which you can barely see. That's a long ways away, actually. And that image looks like this. This is what was drawn carefully, though, over on there. And that symbol is the symbol of the first Christians in the world before Christ was ever even born, which are the Coptics, which are also Egyptian. 500 years before Christ was born, they were talking about him coming. And this was the symbol that they used for him. And here it is, etched in one of the Egyptian walls. That was another symbol for him, which was the triangle with the cross in the middle. And another symbol for him that the Coptics gave. Oh, wait a minute. This is another one that they etched in one of the Egyptian walls. And notice here is not only that symbol, but at the top, the 6 petals of the flower of life, which is the central core. You'll see both these 6 petals, and sometimes the 6 petals with these 6 outer ones around it. And many times you'll see them side by side. You can go into St. Mary's. Once I climbed Mount Sinai, where Moses saw the burning bush, and the bottom of there is, I think it's St. Catherine's, that's what it is. St. Catherine's is a monastery. It's a Coptic monastery. They won't let you take any photographs. But when you go in there, you'll see the 6-petaled pattern on the wall, along right next to it with the 6-petal pattern with the 6 around it, showing that they had the understanding of the flower of life in there. And this was there's another one. They sometimes would do it like this, where they would take 4 intersecting circles surrounded by a circle. Another symbol for Christ. And this was another symbol for Christ. A fish that breathes air. That just happens to have 13 scales on it. And you can check this one out as an interesting bit of information. Even today, Christ is, you'll see this symbol for Christ. You all are familiar with this one, of the fish. And 200 years after Christ died, the Greek Orthodox Church took over the power of the Catholic Roman Church. And at that time, there were many, many changes that were made. And one of them was, prior to those 200 years, in the first 200 years before then, Christ was not known just as the fish. Specifically, he was known as the dolphin. Exactly what that connection is, I don't know. But that's for sure. And then later, it became known. But there was this fish connection. It could very well be that it was because of the timing of Pisces. Before, when Christ came in, he came in right at the beginning of Pisces. And before that time was Taurus. And they worshipped the bull. And the golden bull and all the stuff that was done on there, which was that time. And when Jesus came and became the fish in the Pisces, the bull was thrown down and was no longer the symbol that was being worshipped. Again, I mean, this first whole day really is just we're going to be going about all kinds of different subjects, and we're just trying to get a background of basic information so we can all communicate on. This is Flower of Life again, and I want to show you a relationship in the Flower of Life. The flower, it was called the Flower of Life because, or one of the reasons why, is, well, if you take the image of a tree, specifically a fruit tree comes up, it grows up, and it gets little flowers on it. And then the flowers become a fruit. They change from a flower into a fruit. And then inside of the fruit is the seed that contains the image of the whole tree. And so there is this cycle pattern from a tree to a flower to a fruit to a seed to a tree again that goes around, this particular kind of pattern. And they felt that sacred geometry had that same kind of nature to it. And to show that, this was the flower here. It's 19 circles in here surrounded by 2. And if you were to take out the center circle here and the 6 around the center, does everybody understand that? This one, and then there's a center of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those 6 circles around there. If you take that out like this, does everybody get that? Okay. This is called the seed of life. They felt that it was the seed. Now that was another one that was, I told you, it was on that wall right next to the other one, right next to the flower. And there's another image here that some of you are familiar with probably, which is called the tree of life. And there are 10 spheres connected by these lines. Now originally there were 12 spheres. No doubt about that, because the oldest known tree of life is not Hebrew, but is Egyptian. And they're on 3 pillars at Luxor and 3 pillars at Karnak, Egypt, with the tree of life etched right on there, only with 1 sphere above and 1 sphere below. One up there and 1 below, up here. And but the Jews and the Egyptians had a lot in common. They lived together for a long time, so I'm sure they were interconnected on this belief. And the Kabbalah, by the way, which is the main form that you will find this through today, which we tend to believe is Hebrew, has only been out, as my understanding, at least in present-day time, for 1,700 years. These pillars go way back thousands of years, at least almost 2,000 years before that. And now here's the thing. If you were to take the seed of life, if this is truly the seed, and this image that I was just referring to, how a tree goes to a flower, to a fruit, to a seed, and back to a tree, if that image is that kind of metaphor is contained in the geometry, then the tree would have to be contained in the seed. You understand? In there would have to be, in the seed would have to be the tree. That would have to be the source of the tree, of the Kabbalah, the tree of life. And so if it's true, then those two should superimpose geometrically. This should fit right over the top. And when you do it, you'll see that it fits just like a key, perfectly. Absolutely. Nothing left over. There's 1 point there, here, 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 and the 10th one is down here, exactly on the 2 rims. If you fit 12, the 12 one that we found on the other one, the 12 one will fit right on the flower. Where the 11th and the 12th one will fit precisely above and below, delineating where the flower is. So you get a feel. This is just a real gentle feel of what sacred geometry is about. It's going to get a lot more hardcore, logical preciseness is going to about to enter into all of this in a little bit. These are wheels that are found on the ceilings in Egypt in tombs, in the really oldest of all the tombs. Nobody knows. No Egyptian archaeologist on the planet that I know of knows what they are. And I've talked to many of the world-famous Egyptian archaeologists, and they don't know. They don't know what they are, or why they are, or what they mean. But to me, I know where they came from. Thoth showed me how they were extracted and what they are. And slowly over time I'll show you, but they're proof that the Egyptians just didn't know about the pattern of the flower of life and didn't know about all this knowledge that we're about to tell you. They're proof because in order to get to those wheels, you've got to go deep into the sacred geometry till you get way down in there, and then you'll find these wheels that'll come out, and they're these guys. And they're the key to the harmonics of music, but they're also the key to the harmonics of the dimensional levels. And what you see here, these are always on the ceiling, up in the sky. They're surrounded by the stars. And here, though you can't see this, is a procession of people with animal heads walking in a straight line. If this was a floor, it'd be about like that. And they have these red-orange ovals over their heads, which are, according to Thoth, used to be called the egg of metamorphosis. And you'll understand why metamorphosis is involved in this at one point. And they're walking along here, and then suddenly there's a 90-degree turn, 90 degrees, and they're now walking this way, into the stars, and he's putting a sphere through the bull, which shows you how old this is, going back into the time of Taurus. And I'm going to have to leave these for a while to explain what they are, because we have a lot to lay down before this will all make sense. But these wheels they're maps. They're telling you exactly where they went, precisely where in the dimensional levels and what they were doing and where they were going. But just remember them. We'll have to wait till we get there till it makes sense. This is Leonardo's drawing. Again, this is all introduction still. This Leonardo's drawing with a little bit of me on there. I drew this person sitting down here and some of this other stuff around there. This is going to be a very important drawing in what we're doing. Though sacred geometry, as you will see, can discuss any subject whatsoever, there is no limit on what subject it cannot discuss and describe in detail. I'm going to have blinders on as I discuss sacred geometry. I'm only interested in one thing here. The purpose of this workshop is ascension, which is consciously moving from one world to another, bringing your body with you, which is a little different than resurrection, which is dying, and then afterwards, while you pass through the bardo, to consciously pass through the great void, and then reconstruct your body in that way, which is another possibility. It's just as noble as this one, but there's just another possibility is all. And so in this one here, we are going to be concerned with ascension and the vehicle of ascension called the Merkaba. And the understanding of the Merkaba comes from the remembering of the crystalline energy field that's around the body. This field, and we've had instruments that can detect this field very carefully, will average about 55 feet in diameter, or about 27.5 feet radius around the average person. It'll be bigger if you were taller, and it'll be slightly smaller if you were less. But I'd say they would average somewhere between 50 and 60 feet total. And this is the innermost field. The innermost field, which happens to be right out here at your fingertips, is a star tetrahedral field. It looks like this. And this is going to be the key. This is going to be the doorway. There are other doorways. There are other electromagnetic fields around the body that could be utilized to create different types of Merkabas. I'm not going to say this is the only way, but we're only going to give the instructions on one. This is the easiest, most simplest one of them all, and it's the closest one in. There is another little tiny one at the base of the spine. Little tiny, itty bitty tiny one, which is the original 8 cells, which are in the form of a star tetrahedron, which our electron microscopes can see that they are, and which happens to be in the center of that field. We grew geometrically radially out. We did not grow lengthwise. We grew out in shells that go out. Out at 55 feet, you will find that there's a big round sphere. Just in from the side of that, you're going to find that there's a dodecahedron around that. And then and if you connect the centers of the dodecahedron together, it forms an icosahedron. And there's a nesting pattern that comes in from there all the way down to the central place at the base of your spine. There is a tube that runs from the top, which is directly over the top of your head, 1 hand length above your head, to 1 hand length below your feet down here. And there's a tube that runs through there. That tube the size will vary with each person, but if you take your thumb and your longest finger, your middle finger, and put them together, that's how big around your tube is in diameter. And it comes up into a little crystalline pattern, fits up into the apex, and it's just like a fluorescent tube running through and connects down at this point down here. It connects into other types of fields. There's also an octahedral field that's around here, and it also connects into other fields. There's what is called a cube equilibrium or a cube octahedron that is also connected through this one. But again, we're only going to be interested in this one field, these 2 interlocked tetrahedrons. And so it is this field that as I keep speaking, I'm going to keep aiming for this and aiming for this to reach the understanding of what this is really all about. And the breathing that we're going to do, instead of taking prana in or breath in through our mouth, we're going to stop breathing through our mouth like we do now and start breathing through the top of our head and begin to breathe up through the perineum from underneath. And just to clarify this a little bit more, for some of you who don't know what prana is, there are, in this invisible space right here, we know that there is air, and it's oxygen, nitrogen, etc., the various molecules of there. But also in that space, even if there was no air there, is another substance, if you want to call it a substance, an energy, which is called prana. And prana is everywhere. There is nowhere where it is not. If you had a big chunk of solid steel here, a block as big as this, it would be in the center of it. If you were in deep space and with absolute voidness, there's prana there. It makes no difference where you are, there's always prana, and it's all you need. It's your new science of tachyon energy, which is, and the in machine and a lot of the over-unity generators that are now being created are simply connecting into 4th dimensional prana fields, which is everywhere. It's unlimited. There's no end to the amount of energy, unless we live in a limited world like we do, where we don't know about it, and we're using oil and stuff like that. Energy is not a problem, and for most life forms, that's the least of their problems. And so this is where we're going to be heading. We're going to learn to take the prana down this tube and the prana coming up this tube, and it's going to meet. The male and female prana is going to meet. Where it meets, you can control with your mind. And where it meets, which chakra it meets in, which energy center in the body it meets in, is an ancient science, which we're just going to start just lightly touch upon here in this class. Though you guys know it. I mean, you know it all, man. You've used your Merkaba millions and millions of times. This is nothing new, though for some of you, you may not quite remember. You've got a pretty good idea that it's there, but you can't quite remember. But once you connect into it, the memories are going to come back very rapidly because you're professionals. You'll know what it is. All right. We're going to come back to this many, many times again over here in time. But this is where we're heading. Leonardo understood this very clearly. There's obviously something going on in the world right now. At least it's obvious to a lot of people. Some people, maybe not. This is just normal, what's going on here. But this is not normal, what's happening here in 1992. This is very extraordinary. And in so many ways, you can see this. There's more people on the surface of the earth than there's ever been, and it's about to double. We're about to go from 5.5 billion to 11 billion people here real quickly. And there's a lot of things that are doubling right now, every few years now. One of them that I like to use because it's so clear is knowledge itself, understanding. We have, there's people who have done this. If you take all the information we've learned from the beginning of, say, the Sumerian culture 6,000 years ago to the year 1950, we had so many bits of information. And it was so much, basically, that we had learned. You could put it into the computer and you could count it. And but starting in the early 1900s, and I believe that it was right around 1910, 11, 12, 13, right about in there, something started happening that was extraordinary. And we started becoming a lot more intelligent, a lot faster. And by the year 1950, only 50 years later, in a short amount of time, we had doubled or matched the amount of information that we had learned in 6,000 years. So we learned in 6,000 years, we had doubled that in 50. It's incredible. But we doubled all of that again in 20 years, by 1970. And then we doubled all of that again by about 1980. These are rough dates. And then we doubled it all again by about 1985. And now it's going so fast that it's out of control. Until the computers change. Now the computers are starting to catch up with our ability to receive the information. We're only just a couple more years away from this. Now this phenomenon is going to happen here in your lifetime. Just if nothing else happens, you're going to see this one happen. For example, the 286 came out, and it was able to do something. And then 18 months later, you had the 386 came out, and which about doubled its capabilities. Then 18 months later, you had the 486 come out, and now we're just about ready to have the 586 come out, which will be here in just it's here now. They're just about ready to present it, which is incredible. And they figure that it's doubling about every 18 months. By the end of the century, 7 years from now, you'll have a PC so powerful that a little individual sitting in his room will have more capability than all the computers in the world hooked together. Will have more power than that sitting there right now. Speed, ability, everything. And obviously, at one point here, the influx of information coming in will catch up with our ability to process the information. And what that means, we don't even know yet. One person will be able to map what's going on. For example, one person would be able to map the entire world's weather patterns inch by inch on the surface of the earth. That kind of complexity. And so there's something just on an informational level that's obviously is happening here. And there's all kinds of other things that are changing very, very rapidly. The question is, that I want to ask is, why is that happening now, in 1992? what is it that's making this happen now? Why didn't it happen maybe 1,000 years ago, or maybe 10,000 years into the future? Or why is it happening at all? I mean, there must be something that's triggering this, that's making this happen. What is it? And so we want to look at these two things, why it's happening now, and the star Sirius, why is that star so important? Well, here we are on this third planet, rotating out in space around this little star. At least we think we are. We're not, but we think we are. I'll tell you that later. It's an illusion. And almost everything we see out there is not happening at all like we think it's happening, not even close. And but from within the system where we are, inside of the Earth right here, it's really hard to understand, though we have finally cracked the whole process. It's very difficult to understand some of the things we're about to say. And there is a connection between Sirius A and our star that I can only describe, I'll describe in a story. But the distance in space because we are linked in this way, the distance between us is not as great as you would think. We're only 90 seconds away from each other. That's all it takes, with the proper understanding. And it is very, very easy to get from Sirius A to the solar system, or the other way around. It's very simple. And the dolphins, if you read the stories of Peter Shenstone, who knows Peter Shenstone? Nobody. Wow. Peter Shenstone is the leader of the dolphin movement in Australia, and who will very well may become president of Australia someday. It's a real good chance. He will. He's loved by almost everybody there. There's only 15 million people in Australia, and they're all kids. They're all really young. And they like Peter a lot. And their people in power are real concerned about him. And he has been channeling with the dolphins for a long time. He channeled a 250-pound book from the dolphins. And it weighs so much because it's made of these big sheets of acetate. And it's these drawings describing the history of the dolphins and whales, which are drawn on acetate, and each chapter is about an inch thick. And the cover is just a different color. So you've got a big pile of these books with all these different colors. But when you look at the drawings in them, you see into the acetate. So it feels like, as you're moving the drawings, it feels like you're moving through water. Because you see these fuzzy things slowly coming up and getting clearer and clearer. It's really kind of neat. The whole concept is really neat. They're making a movie of it now in Australia. It's called The Legend of the Golden Dolphin. And this legend describes how they were in another galaxy, totally outside of the one we're in right now, and a long, long, long time ago had to leave. And it was the golden dolphin. When a dolphin is a baby and it's born, it has golden hair all over it. And so it was the baby dolphin that led them out. Okay. That led them out of the, let me put it over here now. That led them out of the other galaxy and into this one, because they had to leave there because of the water was freezing over where they were. And they went to Sirius A, according to the legend of this book. And they stayed there for a long time until they found the tunnel that led to here. And then they came to here, and they obviously came to this planet because it has water on it. Otherwise they'd have been to Venus or somewhere else. But they came here. And so there's this connection between Earth and the other one. It's actually the third planet out from Sirius B, which is the one that they inhabit over there. So, so we see this why there's this importance to the ancients and everything else, because it's as important to, even though that star is so far away in normal ways of thinking, we're linked. We're one with it. It's like the earth and the moon. We're linked together.